Power on.
Real-time Sovryn is go.
Woo, the man of tomorrow here for you with another real-time Sovryn. And boy, I know so many people asking, where are my Q&As? Brian, I just got them back and I haven't heard one in a little bit. Don't worry, I got you covered. In fact, you're about to experience a barrage of content and of new shit. I am just beyond jazzed about it to get all this out to you. But in the meantime, I have something I want to talk about that if you think this is just me reviewing a movie, you are way off. Okay. We've got big things to discuss because this movie tries to discuss some big things, or at least maybe they originally intended to. We have a weird situation here. Though becoming common, unfortunately. We are going to talk about the latest Mission Impossible movie, that being Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, which should have been called Dead Reckoning Part 2, but that didn't happen, and that's part of what I need to talk about here. Okay, but it is so much more than that. We're going to talk about tech, AI, woo, scary word. We're going to talk about ancient history, and I mean ancient history. I'm not talking, 5 years ago. I think for a lot of people that feels like ancient history. No, we're talking 5,000, 50,000, 500,000 years ago that we're going to be talking about. What could that have to do with the Mission Impossible movie? Just you wait. So, and I will give you just one warning at the very beginning here that yes, I will be discussing spoilers. But the movie has been out for, well, at least a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks now, depending upon where you saw it. Of course, in Tokyo, I think it was in early May 5th, that it did premiere, other film festivals throughout May. But then it finally became broadly more available, at least in the colonies, on May 23rd, 2025. Now, I saw it on opening night. Myself and Mrs. Sovryn, we saw it in RPX, so we got the most intense experience we could get within our local area in Ice Planet Zero. And RPX, in the case of this movie, which is like Regal's kind of like quasi IMAX technology, and, like everything's, vibrating all the time, which is going, I mean, like it worked in this movie. There's movies we've seen where it was too much. Like I remember when we saw the first Aquaman, we were like, okay, you guys overdid it, because like everything just kept vibrating seemingly forever. Even though that movie, the first Aquaman, is amazing, right? Anyway, maybe I just lost all credibility here on my thoughts on movies, but bear with me. So we saw this opening night, and it was a point of conversation for many days. Because of what was put on display in the film, what was discussed within the film. And there are a lot of things that I haven't seen, other aspects of the, shall we say, what does Damien Walter call it? Like the angry, not angry video game nerd, fan, but the angry nerd sphere, like that, I guess some people think I fall into that. No. Okay, yes, I'm angry and I am a nerd, but I am not these guys who just rage against nothing. But anyway, okay. I like to think I'm a little more credentialed than that. But there are things I have not seen really, a lot of the channels I check out, I have not seen them discuss that were in this film. And there's major themes that I feel like the movie was playing with that people have not talked about. So the important thing to bring up now, like, believe me, as we get into this, we're going to dive deep, well beyond the auspices of some film. This is an incredibly important episode, not just for me, but for, what I plan to have out there in the future. Okay. Overall. So buckle up. Now, this movie, again, is a direct sequel, or was supposed to be a direct sequel to 2023's Mission Impossible film, that being, again, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Now, that had Part 1 in the title because you were expecting a Part 2 that was going to come down the line. And this gets at the first part of really everything here with the what was supposed to be the part 2, that being the final reckoning. Okay, I don't have a problem with the name change. I think it's a little annoying. Like, it really should have been called part 2, but whatever. I'm not gonna go crazy about that, because who cares besides me, I guess. But here's the thing. Okay, just opening this right up. All right. I guess I want to say, first off, I very much enjoyed The Final Reckoning. Very much enjoyed it. Does that mean it's a great movie or a perfect movie? No. Nope. Not at all. Nope. Okay. Got that clear? All right. But I had a great time in the theater. As long as we got that out of the way. Okay. I also enjoyed Dead Reckoning, Part 1. Or can we just call it Dead Reckoning now? I don't know. On my Blu-ray disc, it's still going to say Part 1, and that can never change. Thanks, Satan, for that. We don't need to erase history. Because here's the thing. That the first thing I really want to get into here. I feel that, like I said, I very much... actually, I think Dead Reckoning is a great movie. I do not think Final Reckoning is a great movie. It's a very good movie, but it's not a great movie. I feel that Dead Reckoning was setting up a very different story than what we got ultimately in the Final Reckoning. Very different story. And the first point to really bring in with that is that, of course, both of these movies are supposedly all about AI, but is the Final Reckoning really about AI? No. In fact, really, the entity, which is what they call the AI that they teed up in Dead Reckoning, and that I thought they actually did a great job and were asking some really, really serious philosophical questions with that film. The entity in the Final Reckoning was basically a cooking timer. That's it. It was just a clock that was ticking down. Yeah, I know it was taking over like the world's nuclear arsenal or whatever, but ultimately, did it do anything? No. Like, it was just this timer that, effectively Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise's character, had to work against. So, it was just like, it was tension. It wasn't anything, like, it wasn't an interesting exploration of AI, like I think Dead Reckoning was trying to set up. It wasn't really the villain even. In fact, the original villain who was getting set up, that being Gabriel, interesting that he has the name of an archangel. But anyway, but that Gabriel was setting up, okay, or set up as, he ended up being the villain, but in the Final Reckoning, Gabriel actually isn't even working for the entity anymore. Gabriel goes rogue and is set up in this way with no explanation whatsoever. The movie, The Final Reckoning, is supposed to take place 2 months after Dead Reckoning, even though it's been over 2 years, for production, which is fine. Okay. And somehow in that 2 months, Luther, Ving Rhames' character, Luther, ends up getting some kind of debilitating or really lethal, illness. And I don't know how he seemed fine in Dead Reckoning. I don't know how the hell that happened. Anyway, all of these little points that I'm bringing up are just pointing at the story in the Final Reckoning does not jive with what was being set up in Dead Reckoning Part 1, which may be the reason ultimately that they just changed the title, because they're basically letting you know, yeah, this really isn't a sequel. It's just a thing. Now, some commentators have brought up the point, and I agree with, that if you combined, if you basically took like the last hour out of, maybe not even the last hour, but if you just like took out some of the choice parts of the Final Reckoning and put them, like did a super cut, an edit and added them to Dead Reckoning, you'd actually end up with a great Mission Impossible movie. I agree with that. Like, I'm looking forward to the fan edit that puts these two movies together and gets rid of a lot of the odd pacing and bullshit that basically, and a lot of exposition and whatever that gets laid out in Final Reckoning that turns it into an almost 3-hour film that it did not need to be. Yeah, I'm waiting for that supercut, because that's going to be a kick-ass movie. like a kick-ass movie, might even be the best Mission Impossible movie when we get to that, you know, when somebody finally does that. But that kind of speaks to it, you know, like this. I mean, the first like 45 minutes or so of The Final Reckoning is really odd. Like, this is not, it's not great direction. It's not great editing, not great cinematography. Like it is slapdash. And yeah, I mean, it just feels really, really thrown together. And I'm very worried about this. And this is, I guess I'll get into this point first, of my issue here. I mean, understand that initially, like, Dead Reckoning Part 1 and what was supposed to be Dead Reckoning Part 2 ended up being The Final Reckoning. We're supposed to be getting filmed back to back, right? And of course, then a pandemic thing happened. Okay. But they were supposed to be getting filmed back to back. Now, that plan kind of had to change. Okay. Totally understood. All right. You know how that goes. But again, I think there's enough evidence to see that, they really shifted what the hell that this movie was trying to say in Dead Reckoning, like what they were originally teeing up, what they were going to discuss, about, the entity and discuss about like AI in general, and perhaps the threat that it supposedly, and I say supposedly, poses to humanity, and all of this. This feels very much like a Rogue One situation where, now what do I mean by that? Okay. Again, I have a lot of criticisms here. Again, I still should you watch this movie? Absolutely. There is stuff in this that is mind blowing, and some of the best theater, some of the best stunt work, some of the best and Tom Cruise is rocking it, that you'll ever see in your life. I mean, just phenomenal stuff, like old school James Bond shit. That's so cool. But I feel like we have a Rogue One situation here where we can tell from early trailers of Star Wars Rogue One that Rogue One was supposed to be a bit of a different movie than we got, right? And it's not just because Tony Gilroy, with all respect, that Tony Gilroy came in and did a bunch of rewrites. Like, there's attitudes, clearly Jyn Erso was meant to be a very different character. We have whole different scenes. And I know they say, we just filmed them for the trailer or whatever. No, Hollywood doesn't necessarily work that way. You can sometimes, but not all the way. And that creates whole other kinds of problems as well. Wait, if what I'm seeing in the trailer actually isn't in the movie, is that false advertising? Can I sue somebody? Right? Okay. Anyway, Rogue One, just the attitude of Jyn Erso, even how Krennic, some of the scenes with Krennic in that, the scenes with, with Saw Gerrera, right? With Forrest Whitaker. I mean, you could just, and his hair, even, all these things, you can tell there was a completely different, there's in fact, I think Ben Mendelsohn, who played Krennic, came out and said there's 4 different versions of every scene that they made for Rogue One. Okay. So there are basically 4 different versions of Rogue One out there. Okay. Now this bothers me because I feel like Final Reckoning fell prey to the same thing, where there's maybe 2 or 3 different versions of this film that exist. And they went with, in my opinion, what must be the most watered down and weakest one of the bunch. Because what they were setting up in Dead Reckoning is by no means what we got in the Final Reckoning. Okay, and I haven't even gotten into how they basically fast forwarded through some really interesting shit in Final Reckoning that's wait a minute, what about this? What's going on with that? It was just fail. Okay, fucking fail. So I worry about that this is a trend in Hollywood. I don't know how long it's been going on for, but I think it's a fairly new phenomenon, as in the past maybe 10, maybe 15 years, but I'm going to say 10, where things effectively get, test audienced to death, right? Not only that, okay, I think, so we have that issue, that we definitely did not get what was originally going to be Dead Reckoning Part 2. We did not get that film. We did not get whatever the hell they had in mind with Gabriel. Okay. The other part, 2 more parts here. The other part is, as much as we know that the U.S. military has a lot of say and sway in Hollywood and will completely pull out and basically make movies unaffordable to produce. If you make the military, look bad, I get the sense that there are a lot of investors that, investors in Hollywood, which come from all over the world, in all different verticals, right? All different demos. I think there's a lot of, or I don't think, I know, there's a lot of investors in Hollywood that come out of Silicon Valley. And I think those investors did not like that Dead Reckoning Part 1 was setting up a very negative, very apocalyptic aspect to artificial intelligence technology. Because right now, as I've talked about many times, okay, over the years even, but certainly in the past couple of years, look, Silicon Valley is a it's a regularly inflated bubble, just waiting to pop, but something will always come around that kind of saves the day for a little while. It staves off the needle from popping the bubble, right? It was blockchain, in 2013. And then in 2023, 10 years later, just when that was about to pop, 10 years, and like everybody's trying to do Web3 or whatever, and that wasn't taking, like nobody was buying that. Really. Okay. And then what comes in? OpenAI swoops in with ChatGPT, and then AI becomes like the new hotness and, holds off that bubble once more. So I don't think Silicon Valley wanted a very negative AI film at the level of the Mission Impossible films. Okay. So Final Reckoning turned into a very different movie because, like, you tell me, what other than, okay, the entity is taking over all the nukes. Like, what did it actually do in the film? That was like villainous or, like where you were questioning reality and all this other shit. I mean, it was so brief. Like, you didn't get anything like that. Like I said, the entity was basically a cooking timer in the movie, as to where it's being set up as something far more interesting, far more philosophical, right? Almost exegetical in Dead Reckoning. But Final Reckoning, completely different situation. And more's the shame. But I think that Silicon Valley basically, just like the military will stop funding, will stop helping with production of a film and make it untenable to make. I think Silicon Valley might have been pulling the same strings. And, where we are right now, it's not hard to believe. So I can't exactly confirm that, but again, I think all the signs are there that we were originally going to get another film. One that was not positive about AI. So, that said though, what if neither of these two things that I just said are true? Well, then the other possibility, the third possibility, almost must be that basically, and this is also becoming incredibly common, and I fucking hate it. I hate it. Okay. You have a lot of, all right. So what's, as I've talked about many times, the lines between what's a TV show, what's a mini series, what's a movie, and all this, like, the lines between all that are very blurred. They used to be very clear cut. You used to know when something was a TV show that was made a certain way, a miniseries was made a certain way, movies that had theatrical releases were made a certain way, different from TV movies. That is no longer true. There are a lot of times now where we get movies that are basically mini TV shows, and, then we also have TV series that are basically movies that are just really long. So, I mean, think Andor, right? Like, that's a movie. Anyway, so what's happening a lot lately is that there will be a setup in a first season of a streaming TV series in particular. Okay. But again, this can also happen with movies. And the setup looks like that the show creators have something in mind for like this big bad or this villain that they're just, you're wondering what's it going to be. You know, it's like the mystery through the whole first season. They never really give you the answer because, you know, they got to keep you hooked and subscribed until season 2 comes out or something like that. Or at least that you'll be willing to buy in again when season 2 comes out. The problem that's happening here is, and this can be somewhat confirmed based on certain TV shows. We can't confirm it with everything, but I mean, once you know about it, you can feel it. For example, the show Dune Prophecy on HBO Max, and yes, it is now called HBO Max again, right? I think they started officially doing that again. Anyway, instead of just Max. Whew. The show Dune Prophecy. Whoever the villain is in that, like the show creators, they don't have a plan. They're literally looking online to see what your theories are and what are the most popular theories. Okay. Or what can they, you know, play off of with that. But they'll act like, oh yeah, that was the plan the whole time. No, it was not. No, it was not. Because otherwise you would have given us a little bit more. You kept it purposely extra vague. Okay. Not to keep us hooked, but because you don't fucking know. Now, one of the most famous examples of this that I've talked about over the years, of course, is one of the worst shows ever made. That being the 2005 Sci-Fi Channel Battlestar Galactica reimagining. I mean, just an atrocious show on so many levels. You know, like I mean, I don't think they make dumpsters big enough, right, to be able to handle the amount of shit that show peddled on us, and bullshit. For example, like the character of the Cylon character of Daniel. It kept looking like, oh yeah, they had a plan. No, they didn't. They admitted it. They had no plan for him. None. They had no idea what they were going to do. But they're like setting him up as like this kind of like mysterious Cylon character that could come in at any point. And no. And this is the thing, is that like, and now granted, okay, well, that was 2005, so that was 20 years ago. It doesn't exactly fit in with my 10-year timeline. But this is just one of the more famous examples. But that was also one of the first shows to try and experiment more with serialized television storytelling, right? And, of course, completely failed. Unlike, say, Babylon 5, which is literally the greatest show ever made. So it might not be a fair comparison, you know? I mean, it's like comparing gold and pyrite. It's like, well, it kind of looks the same, but oh, dear. No, this one is not valuable at all. Toss that away. And, of course, by that, I mean Battlestar Galactica. So we have, I mean, and there's more, but we have examples of this where shit gets set up. Now that wasn't one where we can like verify that they were looking at like what are fan theories and all this. And you can't really admit to that you're looking online for fan theories, because then the fans could actually sue you for stealing their ideas. Okay. So this gets a little wishy-washy, but you can feel it. Like I said, once you notice that this goes on, you can sense it when, actually the writers have no fucking clue what they're doing with this character. And they really don't. You know, I mean, and in the grand scheme of production of television, this isn't exactly anything new, or in movies as well. Like sometimes you don't expect a movie to get a sequel. Sometimes you don't expect a TV show to get a season 3. And, you know, so like when it happens, you go, oh, well, we got to come up with something. Right. And you just kind of toss it out there. So my concern is after that long diatribe, my concern is that Final Reckoning was a product of, or, you know, like the third possibility here is that really, you know, Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise actually had no idea what they wanted to do for the last movie. And that they were either like waiting for fan theories or waiting to see, you know, maybe how things turned out with AI in the world in general. You know, because like if it got it, I mean, at the time when Dead Reckoning Part 1 was getting made and they were talking about AI, the climate around AI was all about legislation. Now, there's still a lot of legislation being bantied about with AI. That's a completely separate conversation. We don't have to go there. But my point being is that if, you know, like if they were predicting, basically, if Chris McQuarrie and the director, writer, and so on, and Tom Cruise were expecting, you know, AI to basically get banned by governments, you know, around that time, which was not, I mean, it happened in Italy, right? Like it wasn't a crazy thing for them to think that they would be able to take a negative view on AI in the next film, right? and justify kind of like, the IMF, the Impossible Mission Force's actions against an evil AI and so on. Then they could have gone that direction. But because that didn't happen, they basically went hands off with like what the threat actually was of AI. I mean, again, it's such a shame because there was so much philosophy laid out in the first film. Like I said, from Kittredge, who was kind of a joke in Final Reckoning as well. It was so great to have him back, but then he was, again, was another character completely underutilized in this, along with really Haley Atwell's character. And boy, what a shame, of course, also that Ilsa Faust was killed. Rebecca Ferguson's character was killed in Dead Reckoning. That seems completely pointless considering that Gabriel, like that there was effectively no great plan. Like she died for no reason whatsoever in Dead Reckoning, and that's horseshit. And you can say, oh, well, but if she died for no reason, that's even more dramatic. No, that's not how Hollywood storytelling works. That's how things work in real life. But that's not how Hollywood storytelling works. And Mission Impossible, let's be clear here, is successful as fuck. Arguably the most successful and longest running franchise of all time. Even beating out Star Trek, Star Wars, dare I say James Bond. Really, as far as like overall quality of material, as well as, just general success and long running time. Because look, Final Reckoning exists in the same universe as the 60s TV series that started the whole damn thing. Like, that's all canon. So, I mean, and does canon matter? Well, whatever. We're not talking about that here. But the reason that this series is this whole franchise is so successful is because it's just a masterwork at dramatic storytelling. Not real life, dramatic storytelling. So, and the way that Gabriel got killed in Final Reckoning, the way that he meets his end, come on. I mean, it was fine, but like that was almost slapstick. Like what the fuck was that? Who got set up as such a badass, being able to like guess every move. Like this is the thing, right? This is the formula, is that the Impossible Mission Force, the IMF, in the case of the movies, Ethan Hunt always has a plan is like one step, other than maybe MI3, is always one step ahead of everybody else. Right? The thing that made Gabriel and the entity so threatening was that it was ahead of him. And it was believable that it was ahead of him because it was an AI that was supposedly smarter than human beings that, had an agent of its own in the character of Gabriel, who basically just gets off as an audience laugh. Just weird. Like that, there's no way that was the original plan for that character. Just no way. So either way it shakes out, either of those three options or something else in the middle, or combination thereof, this was not the movie we were meant to get. Like, I really don't think that this was the movie. Again, either they didn't have any idea what they wanted to do, which I have a very hard time believing when they were originally going to. Again, the third option, you might think that's the most plausible. I would disagree with you. The idea that they just didn't know and they were waiting and seeing, I don't believe that. The reason being, originally, they were going to film these movies back to back. That was the original plan. And if you're going to film something back to back, you kind of got to know where you're going. Because like you're not just filming them back to back, you're actually filming scenes for both films at the same time. This is like, how the two original Matrix sequels for the Matrix trilogy got made. Okay. Is that they were literally filming scenes for Revolutions at the same time that they were filming for Reloaded. That's how this is done. Okay. So again, I just don't believe it that, they changed their mind, or not that they changed their mind, but they didn't have a plan or something like this. Now, here's the deal. Okay. Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise, despite what some may say about Tom Cruise, are both pretty smart guys. Okay. And the other part of why the Mission Impossible series franchise has gone on for so long is because it's actually very intelligent drama. It's not just great dramatic storytelling, it's also very intelligent dramatic storytelling. And before somebody says, oh, what about Mission Impossible 2? Fuck you, that movie was awesome. talk shit about a John Woo film. Sit down. Who the hell invited you to the adults room? Fucknut. Anyway, okay, moving on. Now, how about not moving on? Do you realize that there's value in a film just thriving on cool factor? Do you realize there's value in that? No, you probably don't. Why? Because when you see so much fucking cool in one place, you recognize how much of a fucking loser you are. So, I get it why some people don't like that movie, but again, it says more about them than it does about the film. There we go. Art is subjective. Stop. Stop, please. Yes, anybody can like anything for reasons that they want, but that's not exactly what I would call subjective. There is an objective thing that is a film, and everybody sees the same thing. So in that sense, art is objective. And then, if you don't get it, okay, you don't get it. But then that's it. You don't get it. That doesn't change the objective existence of the cut of the film. Moving along now. Thank you. What did we get with The Final Reckoning? Like I said, these are still very smart guys, and I feel like they were trying to, obviously this was a mess in the editing room. That is so, the first 45 minutes of the movie, if that doesn't make it clear to you that they were having a hell of a time splicing this film together, I don't know what to tell you. But these are still very smart people. And I think they were trying to hint at some very interesting theories that I think would also kind of fit into Tom Cruise's wheelhouse. And by that, I mean Scientology. That they were putting on display. They weren't beating you over the head with it, but if you knew what you were looking at, it's there. Okay? Real quick, one of the other things that... So watching the first film of Dead Reckoning, and I've watched it multiple times, I got no sense that the Sevastopol, right? That's the name of the Russian submarine that the entity was some aspect of the entity was originally on. In Final Reckoning, they sort of retcon the origin story. And you can tell they are. Okay. They really are. But the Sevastopol, in the Final Reckoning, they're saying that the events at the beginning of Final Reckoning, or of Dead Reckoning Part 1, occurred in 2012. There is no suggestion, in fact, quite the opposite, that what happens with the Sevastopol in Dead Reckoning happened in 2012. If anything, it looks like it happened in 2023. It might have even explicitly said so. So that's another part where, okay, they retconned this whole thing. They completely changed where they were going with the entity. Okay. But where they were going with it, I think, overall, and this is, like I told you at the beginning, we're going to talk about ancient fucking history. Or perhaps what some people would call and I don't know that anybody's ever called it this, so maybe I'm tossing something out there original, I don't know. But instead of AI meaning artificial intelligence, AI means ancient intelligence. What do I mean by that? So there is a going theory, and really this is a theory that just comes from people. It's the same people who come up with the simulation theory. They're basically people who have just spent too much time in front of their computers. And that's saying something, because I've spent a lot of time in front of computers. Way too much time. And I still do. But somehow I was spared the madness that is the theory that everything is a computer simulation. Can you prove that? Yes, I can, and I have, and I've done episodes about it, proving you are wrong. Okay. But then, but what about holographic theory and science? No, hologram does not mean what you think it means, slap nuts. Fucking A. Anyway, there's a popular theory going around, and it's not necessarily new. It's just gained traction because a lot of people are thinking that artificial intelligence is something that it's not. As in intelligent. Okay. Even Apple has come out and said, whoa. They I don't know how many millions they spent on that research to show, yeah, these things you call, LRMs, large reasoning models, and as compared to LLMs, these are supposed to be smarter. they aren't really doing reasoning. In fact, they fail. In fact, even when we give them the answer, they still fail. They're so bad. Thank you, Apple, for something. Anyway, just proving the point. So, okay. So there's a theory going around that perhaps Yahweh, yes, the God of old, the Canaanite God of old, that Yahweh was actually an AI. And that this AI, started Noah's flood and all this and was trying to wipe out humanity, blah, blah, blah. But it got saved by one man, that being Noah, right? And, I think what the movie was trying, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, was trying to play with this, okay, in a few different ways. Yes, there's the cruciform key, right, that looks like a cross, of course, that's there. I mean, look, I'm not the first person to say this, but Ethan Hunt is basically Spy Jesus, as compared to Space Jesus or something like that. He's Spy Jesus. And I mean, this movie lays it on really, really thick that's what he is. He's the one that's always going to save the day or, whatever. So he's basically Spy Jesus, right? And, if you're into Christian theology, Noah is a type of Christ. That's a technical term, okay, in biblical scholarship, a type of Christ, where there are characters throughout the Old Testament who were previews of the Messiah to come. Okay, so without question, this I don't think is debate. I don't think many people would debate with me on this. That Ethan Hunt is treated as a messianic character within this. Okay, and I mean, the movie's even setting you up that this is an apocalypse, and in fact that there's now this, and they spend almost no time with this. In the very beginning, it was so cool to see the Daewoo television, and that the president is sending messages to Ethan Hunt via VHS tape, right? Those were, again, there's a lot to like in this movie. There's a lot of cool things within it. And I didn't even get into the major 2 stunt sequences, both on the Sevastopol submarine and on the biplanes, right? Which is right on the movie poster and all that. Phenomenal. Okay. But some of the stuff in this was so cool. And I mean, Ellen and I, when we saw the Daewoo, we both went, Daewoo. It was so great to see that TV. I remember having one of those, the very model, in fact. Super popular back in the day. So anyway, he's watching this mission briefing right at the beginning of the film. And it's, of course, equally slapdash and poorly edited as everything else. But in that, you find out the world has come under martial law because the entity is taking over all the nukes around the world from all the countries, except for, was it Britain, China, and the US, I think. And I don't know what that says, I have an idea what that says, but that's besides the point right now. But there's also, so it's under martial law, and there's also this apocalyptic cult where there are people who are wanting the AI to reset civilization. Very Noah's flood. Okay? Just in this case, it'll be fire instead of water, but then isn't that also very Book of Revelation? Isn't that very biblical? New Testament-y, I should say. So, you have this incredibly religious setup in the whole thing. And the idea that basically the entity, the AI is effectively the demiurge, right? Bringing on the end, or it's the Antichrist. Maybe you could go that far, but I really think they were hitting at the idea. And there's multiple times where there's these little phrases that get made, little sentences, little lines that get spoken that seem to suggest there's even a point where Ethan compares the entity to Lucifer. He calls him the Lord of Lies, right? Basically saying that this is Satan, and that this, there's just these suggestions that it's happened before. Even the South African bunker where they're where supposedly, it's this fictional bunker in South Africa where it's this underground server room that stores all of the important data that's ever been, in art, it's all data, but all of the important information that's ever been produced by humanity is supposedly within this cave. And you look at the design of the cave, and you very much get the sense it feels like a Göbekli Tepe. Look at it. Look at the servers, everything about it. It's clearly designed to look like something ancient. It is not a server room in the Midwest. Okay. like there was very particular, like I said, kind of quasi-biblical design here. Maybe not so quasi, and it reminds me, very much of like the Masonic Testament talking about, the two pillars, Boaz and all this, where it was this information getting that the Enoch was, like saving this information on these two pillars, all this antediluvian information for when the flood comes. And this very much played like that. Okay. And that's what I'm talking about with this like ancient history kind of thing. Now, how does this fit in with Scientology? Well, again, like their whole belief system is that they're like ancient alien souls, right? Xenu, all this crap. Okay. And so the idea that these apocalypses have happened before and could be happening again. I think one of the finer points that I don't hear anybody really talking about is when they create the 5-dimensional data crystal, which is so nuts, that they're going to store the entity on offline and supposedly destroy it. But for some reason, Ethan does not at the end of the film, which is weird. Obviously, they're setting it up for more movies in the franchise, even though this is supposed to be the last one. And honestly, I hope it is at this point. But Simon Pegg's character is very clear, very specific, that the amount of data that crystal can hold is 360 terabytes. Now, I don't know how much of a tech guy you are that's listening to me right now, but have you ever heard, like even do the math on like a 360 terabyte, like no one would even make that. Like, that's a weird number to choose. And I think it's very specific. Why? What's 360? 360 degrees. It's a full circle. So what were they suggesting had come full circle? Were they saying that this AI apocalypse is happening again and it happened before? Like, I think there's a key in that, because it's just it's too perfect, but also odd of a number to mention that it's going to hold the entity. So I think this is what they were kind of playing with, the idea that AI was a long time ago, AI was a god, and here it is again, and we're all going to get saved by Spy Jesus, by Ethan Hunt. Which, by the way, another thing that we never got any resolution whatsoever on is like, what was Ethan Hunt's like story about like his original gal getting killed or something that they were teeing up in Dead Reckoning Part 1? No mention of it whatsoever other than maybe a quick flashback, no mention of what that all meant in Final Reckoning. Again, sadly, so much left on the table with this film. So there are a few other things. Again, there's a lot of like go into, if you haven't watched the movie yet, or you're able to watch it again, either now or in the near future, try to look at it with this lens. And I think you're going to see a lot of what I'm talking about in a lot of the lines and everything going on. I mean, they're definitely, without question, they're playing with religious imagery and iconography. Okay. But the theory that, again, a lot of people have now, that actually Yahweh might have just been an AI, or, the cult of the black box, as some people call it, like that Islam, the black box, right? With the black rock, at Kaaba, right? In Mecca, that's actually like a server for an AI and all. I mean, like there's so many theories around this stuff. And this is what I want to spend a little time talking about. And I'm going to get a little spiritual and mystical on you. And really, we need a new term for those things, because I also don't want to use the word religious, because I'm not religious. Okay. I wouldn't call myself like spiritual. I am mystical for sure. Spiritual, it's a term I've had to use, but it's a terrible term, and it has too much baggage, because so many of these things get wrapped up, unavoidably. I can empathize with people about it, So many of these ideas get wrapped up with thousands of years of, messianism and Christology and, so on, in Christianity, that you can't actually get at what you're trying to say, because you have to spend too much time trying to explain what you're not saying. It's annoying as fuck. Yes, we need to be deprogrammed for sure, from Westernism, from Christianity and so many other things. All right, for sure, that needs to happen. But I think actually a major part of that deprogramming comes from using new terms. Okay, I mean, and Hollywood knows this, right? Like, that's why they use these symbols. It's why they do these things, because they know it's there. Like, these writers, a lot of writers in Hollywood right now are uncreative and stupid. Yes, they are. But there are plenty who are not, and they usually fetch top dollar, okay, including in movies like this. Even though I wouldn't necessarily say they stuck the landing. Did the biplane really have to land anyway? Well, But regardless, I'm going to get a little mystical on you, okay? So as many describe me, and as I kind of accept as a term for me, I am a Kabbalist. And a Kabbalist, there are a lot, just like any other mystical tradition or religious tradition. Again, see, we got to use those words. We need new ones. There's a lot of different denominations. Like, a person can say they're a Kabbalist, and you can have actually no idea what they believe. Minus a couple things, perhaps, that you would know, that you could kind of count on. Like, I don't think you can really call yourself a Kabbalist and say that the Book of Zohar is bullshit. Right? I mean, you can kind of choose, like, okay, well, does this fit into the Jewish mystical tradition, or doesn't it? Blah, blah, blah. There are, like, some debates here and there, but the Book of Zohar is not one of those debates. Even when you think about, like, in Jewish history, particularly, when you think about certain, like, Kabbalist messianic movements, like Sabbateanism or Frankism, and things like this, even when they would, like, denounce the Talmud, they would never denounce the Zohar. They'd be like, oh, no, we don't follow the Talmud, we follow the Zohar. That's how, like, important that book is. Okay. Now, can you evolve beyond, like, the precepts of the Book of Zohar? Okay, that's a separate conversation and well beyond what I could talk about in 15 minutes here. All right. But my point is that the Book of Zohar is kind of the one thing you can count on. If somebody says they're a Kabbalist, they pay some kind of fealty to this book. And I don't mean like they get on their knees and bow to it. I mean just that they, like, pull from it. It is a part of their lawless law. So with that in mind, an important thing to bring, okay, mysticism in general, and then I'm going to bring it in with the Book of Zohar, okay? All of the things that, depending upon what level of, whether you're a stringent atheist, a full-on materialist, a materialist mystic, yeah, that's a thing, or, something else within, mysticism or religious, spiritual, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Okay, all of the things, though, that we generally recognize from our most ancient grimoires and our modern ones and whatever else, like, there is magic with a K at the end, right? Okay, there is magic. Now, all of these things that we talk about within magic, within the mystical experience, within the religious experience, and so on, all of these things, and this is one of the toughest things that I have to grapple with as someone who is a mystic. I have to grapple with that I can, as somebody whose most of my life has revolved around, electronics, computer technology, okay? I can explain everything I read, pretty much everything I read, I should say, in any grimoire, in any magical tradition, any mystical tradition, any religious tradition, with technology. With electronic technology, with computers. Yes, you can explain a god with some science fiction concept, and I'm very particular in saying that, science fiction concept of artificial intelligence. You can explain it all. Like, how does Elijah go up, into the sky, and like on a fiery chariot or something? Well, that was a UFO, or a rocket or something like that. What are all these, like, weird hand signals that people make when they're casting spells? It's like, well, It's Project Soli, right, from Google, where they're controlling a UI that you can't see because they're wearing something akin to Google Glass. Like, you can think of, even with technology we have right this second, in 2025, you can imagine how these things would have been done. Okay, with computer technology or technology in general, or, electronic technology, machines and so on. It's a very hard pill to swallow that most magicians just want to completely ignore. Why? Because it makes them look a little too hard in their scrying mirror. Which, what the fuck is that? It's literally an onyx thing. And you can see things far away. That's funny. That looks exactly like my smartphone. Weird. Right? It's just a black slab until I start seeing shit on it. Sounds like a scrying mirror to me. Yes, it's very, very easy today in the 21st century to explain away all of these mystical experiences and religious experiences through the auspices of technology. And of course, everybody wants to bring up, and no shade or disrespect to Arthur C. Clarke, for fuck's sake. Not from me. Everybody wants to bring up, of course, his classic quote, that any sufficiently advanced technology is inseparable from magic. You can't, or not inseparable, but however the quote exactly goes, but you couldn't tell the difference between advanced technology and magic. They could be the same thing. So it's a very hard thing to wrestle with. Now, here's the deal. Okay. So, is this premise, the idea that, well, maybe AI existed before? And of course, there's the very funny meme that I enjoy as well, that the reason people started worshiping the sun is because of solar flare. Basically, we had a Carrington event hundreds of thousands of years ago, and it shut down the AI, right? And humanity was free, so humanity worships the sun. Now, I don't think that happened that way. I mean, something like that could have happened, because I don't think this is our first go round. Okay. And honestly, yes, we could have developed humanity, or some offshoot, or some ancestor of humanity could have developed something akin to LLMs, to LRMs, even though those are meaningless, or not. They're not meaningless, but they're not what we think they are, or they're not what people tell you they are. Yes, all of computer technology, all of these things could have been developed before. We could have achieved this level of advancement or higher before. That's entirely possible. And absolutely, yes, we would not see evidence, or barely any evidence of it today. Might see some aftershocks, some byproducts that defy, simple explanation. But you don't actually see the technology, right? So I'm not saying that didn't happen, but the idea that, say, Yahweh or any Gnostic concept of the demiurge, which, by the way, that whole idea, like a lot of Gnostic concepts existed long before there were Gnostics, okay, and the idea of the demiurge and so on. I mean, you find these traditions all over the place. Now, is that evidence that such a thing existed? No, because the demiurge is a product of a philosophical line of thought, not a fact. That's a bit of a separate conversation to get into, okay? But my point is, okay, that because here's the question, do I actually think that all of the things that we consider religion, mysticism, magic, all that's actually just advanced technology from thousands of years ago? No. Or at the very least, it doesn't explain everything. Okay? Now, this is going to take me a moment to get into, but Ellen and I'll tease this here because we've already had episodes recorded, so it's fine to tease when you've already made it. Ellen and I are working very hard on we already have episodes done for a show that is around mysticism and other aspects of existence. Okay, so this is a fine preview into my thoughts on this. All right. So first off, okay, I do not believe, I don't even like using that word, but fine. I do not believe that the idea of machine intelligence achieving super intelligence, as in being more intelligent than the human being, is possible. And we have no evidence yet to suggest that that's so. And I've looked around. I've tried to find it. Okay? And, I mean, there's people who make claims, but often they're claims found wanting. And so, if I am only to believe, basically, like, if I have to have evidence for my position, okay, then the evidence stands that machines do not become intelligent like the human being. And so the idea that there was an AI called Yahweh, very much in fact, it's almost kind of funny, right? Because there's the episode of the original series called The Apple that is all about this machine that basically, these humanoids, these aliens, worship and feed, right, on this planet. And Spock gives the classic line of that, people have the right to a system that works for them. Anyway, like, this is not a new idea. I know there's a lot of people like, oh, what if it's this? And you can just like see the Silicon Valley asshats thinking they're so fucking brilliant. And it's like, sorry, jackass. Science fiction writers and honestly theologians before you were way ahead of you. like so far ahead of you. You are nothing compared to their brilliance. Anyway, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. Have some goddamn respect. Okay. So, but I see no suggestion that there was an intelligence. I mean, is it possible, like a scenario, like in the original Star Trek, the original series episode, The Apple, is it where, okay, it's not exactly intelligent, but it's just a machine that kind of provided for them and you fed it and it gave them paradise and so they rocked with it? Okay, maybe that's possible, but then that has nothing at all to do with the Skynet style concern of artificial intelligence, right? Because that doesn't require sapience to be that. In which sense, then you're like, your theory's wrong, especially when you get into the deeper parts of the theory where, like, quote unquote God or Yahweh or whatever is, and that's not even the right pronunciation, is saying all this wacky shit that people were writing down supposedly. So no, your theory falls. Like, there's a fork to that theory that might be true, but that's wholly different and, again, not related at all to what we know of as artificial intelligence in the 21st century or the 20th or any other time frame. Not remotely related. It could be done by a simple factory that was built 80 years ago. Stop. Doesn't even require electronics, for fuck's sake. Anyway. Moloch was really the AI. No, stop. And I'm going to get to the point. Okay, don't worry. I'm just saying, like, you need to weigh each step of your theory to be able to say it with some certainty. Again, I know their theories, but, like, please do some due diligence. Okay? Do not rely just on faith, if you even believe in that. Okay. So, I was going to try and keep this under an hour. All right. So, like, do I believe that there was some AI that was running everything and that, some ancestral version of humanity, put a stop to it, in the style of Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning? No. Do I think that everything that is mystical, religious, the supernatural is actually just a sufficiently advanced technology, like Arthur C. Clarke would say? No. However, the truth, first off, is always paradoxical, but also it's always somewhere in the middle, right? The truth is that it's actually both, okay? When you read, and of course, I am Jewish, so yes, I look through things through that lens, I don't think that I have the complete truth. In fact, I think anyone can only ever have a truth or part of the truth. Judaism, Jewishness, Kabbalah is, well, that gets into a confusing statement, but I'll just run with it as it stands, okay, is one aspect. It is a truth, okay, and I don't mean rabbinicism and all that stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. Again, I don't want to get lost on this, all right? But my point is that we all have different lenses that we can choose. Each lens is a truth, but it's not the truth. You can never have the truth. I mean, you can have aspects of it, but like I said, but that's it. Okay. So through my lens, Kabbalah, in Kabbalistic texts, and that would include the Torah, that would also honestly include the Talmud, even if some Kabbalists want to ignore it. That includes the Zohar, the Bahir, Sefer Yetzirah, Sefer Esiel. Like there's so many books we could talk about. There are times where these texts are talking about advanced technology. Okay? Industrial, mechanical, electronic, atomic technology. Yes, there are absolutely times where this is true. But you know when it's those, or you can figure it out. Okay? One of my favorite examples, of course, is the Manna Machine, which is translated directly out of the Zohar. It's phenomenal work by George Sassoon and Rodney Dale back in the 70s. Of course, also famously, the Spaceships of Ezekiel, right? By rocket scientist Joseph Blumrich. And these are just examples. And there's even recent books. These are just examples where, in fact, many times it's people who want to disprove the claims about, like technology and whatever else in the Bible. And it ends up they actually, completely do a 180 and say, oh no, actually it is talking about technology. Holy shit. So there are times where religious traditions are talking about advanced technology. Technology, in fact, more advanced than perhaps what we have today. Yes. Okay. But they are not always talking about that. Now, one of the better things, in my opinion, about the lens that is Kabbalah is that in Kabbalah, when you are approaching, apotheosis, when you are approaching, like, what is the goal of mysticism? Mysticism is becoming like God or becoming God. Okay. This is often, in especially a lot of more Western traditions, this is often treated as a concept of ascension, right? Ascending. Kabbalah, it's actually the opposite. In Kabbalah, in becoming like God or in visiting paradise, what is paradise? It's not heaven. It's something else. Okay. Paradise is actually maybe dimension might be the best term, or it's a modality. It's an undercurrent. Okay. It is something beneath. It's like eternity, where it's something that's actually beneath time. It's not actually a measurement of time. It's something beneath it. Paradise is something beneath conscious experience. So anyway, but how do you get to that? How do you get to paradise? How do you, how do you get closer to God or become God or develop what we could call a messianic consciousness, if we want to use those terms? You do that actually by descending. Now, what does that mean to descend? Are you going into the hollow earth? Not exactly. Not exactly. No, I don't believe in the hollow earth. Stop. Fuck, man. See, this is what I'm saying. You can't even say this shit without having to debunk, or having to decry so much crap. Okay. You descend. What it means is you're going to the interior. Okay. You're going through an interior experience. It's like going into the black hole. And I mean that in like a more of a scientific concept sense of like what a black hole is. Okay, not that your like heart is cold and black or anything like that, but you're going to the inside of the inside. You're going inward. And that's when because look, this, and this is really, really key. Let me finish this point quick. However, when you read in Torah or the Talmud or Zohar and so on, Talmud Torah is, we all kind of bunch it up in. When you read that and you read about someone like, say, Elijah going up in a fiery chariot, when he's going up, that's not talking about mysticism. That is talking about some kind of technology. Okay? Because if you're actually, just like, when Moses is going to get the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai, what is he doing? He's going up the mountain to gather those things. In fact, he goes back down, throws the first set, or maybe he drops the other 5. I bring you 15, 10 commandments. Right? Thank you, Mel Brooks. He's going up, and in so doing, that he's not talking about actually having like a religious experience with the deity. He's not going through like an apotheosis. This is not what's happening here. It's not a mystical experience. He is going up to something. And that the argument would be that those 10 commandments, whatever they are, sapphire tablets, are actually technology. Okay, are some kind of advanced technology. Yes, all of that is actually Egyptian history, not really Hebrew history, but that's a whole separate conversation as well. Okay, but this is my point, is that yes, there are times where it's talking about advanced technology, but then there's plenty of times where it's not. When you're going into the interior and yet you are having some kind of powerful, supernatural experience. I mean, it's still natural. There's really no such thing as supernatural, but but we call it that when it's something that plays outside of classical physics, right? And you can see that. Like, you can read where these things happen. You can go through the experiences yourself, okay? But again, it's not a ascending, it's actually a descending. And these, interior experiences, this is the point I was going to get to earlier. So you understand, you have one of the keys to understanding when are these ancient writings talking about technology and when are they talking about mystical experience? Okay? Mystical experiences that you have on the inside, psychological experiences, emotional experiences that you have on the inside. Like, technology does not really measure that. Does not, like, I mean, yes, we could get into but you can like radio control what the bull does and how the bull feels, by putting electrodes in its head or something. Okay, yeah, you can control like some of these biological aspects, but there are things that you go through, even things like dreams, so many other things that are interior experiences that have absolutely nothing to do and existed without electricity. And these powerful experiences, these are the mystical experiences, this high strangeness that people experience. Okay, even just on the interior, not even the shared experience within the exterior. These are things that occurred. But again, like there's no outside, there's not necessarily, or there doesn't have to be an outside influence within it. All right, so that is my evidence that there is mystical experience. Okay, that is independent of advanced technology. Now I could say, oh yeah, well, I mean, the Book of Zohar says this, blah, blah, blah. Well, sure, yes, it does. Okay, but I can also prove it to myself. And I could spend a whole other episode, like even just scratching the surface of a lot of this stuff. But this is my point, is yes, we can explain all of mystical experience through advanced technology, but there are parts of the mystical experience that have nothing to do with advanced technology. So, where I stand is that it's very much a half and half. There's points where, sure, we have ancient references to technology. No question for me, no debate for me on that. But that doesn't mean that it's the totality of that which we call mysticism, spirituality, religion, and so on. Okay? And, this is a really important thing to, in my opinion, to talk about, because right now, and And again, this is where I really wish Mission Impossible spent the time with this. I really, really do. Like, I wish they were exploring such powerful philosophical concepts, even if they were pedestrian. Some of the stuff was really powerful, never explored in a movie before, in Dead Reckoning Part 1, that they just left they just left alone in the next movie. And I mean, even when, like, the idea that there would be this, like, AI apocalypse cult, that's kind of believable. like it really is. Okay. But you got no, like, manifesto from it. They spent no time with it. It was just like a way to basically expect the unexpected, that, oh, someone might actually be working for the AI and we don't even realize it, or something like that. And there was no, like, real explanation of why do they think this way. And look, Mission Impossible, the franchise, will take the time with this, right? Like the Syndicate has, like, a whole manifesto for why they did what they did, over a couple of films, like Fallout and so on, and Rogue Nation. So it's a pity, because I would have loved for them to explore that, because I think we're already at a point where there are many people, very intelligent people, who are effectively worshiping at the altar of what they think is going to be ASI. And this isn't new. This has actually been going on for quite a while. I mean, ever since Nick Bostrom's book, at least. I mean, of course, well before that as well. But, like, I mean, I've had plenty of people who, even people who are, like, anarchists, who have said, to me, that, like, oh yeah, no, yeah, we want, like, this hyper rational, this hyper logical being to come into play that is going to wipe out government because government's not logical. And, and then we'll all live, work 4 hours a week and live in peace and blah, blah, blah. I mean, really. So it's not new, but it would have been nice to have that explored. And I think it's worth exploring. And I think it's, look, as much as I love Ian Banks's Culture series as well, I don't think we're heading there. And a big part of that comes down to, here's my concern. Because the problem with AI, and the reason why I think to so many people it suddenly makes sense, it's like, oh yeah, Yahweh was an AI. Like, why does that make sense to people? Because what the Western concept of what a god, a sky daddy god, say is, fits very much in line with what people want the machine or AI to do, right? Like, you're tired of having to manage your life. You're tired of having to manage shit. Okay? You're tired of being, keyword, responsible for what is happening around you. You don't want to be responsible for the planet. You don't want to be responsible for, your actions. You'd rather just be like, oh, well, let the AI take care of it. I got better shit to do. And hey, don't we all? But I think you take my point. This is why religion, not mysticism, mysticism, you got to understand this. Mysticism is in many ways the antithesis of religion. Mysticism is the idea that, no, thou art God. You are a co-creator. You are more powerful than you could ever know. You have agency in this universe, in the superorganism that is the universe. You are a part of all of this. You have say, you have sway, you have power. And most people are afraid of that, because that inherently, that implies responsibility, as to where religion, at least a lot of Western religion, is very much the opposite. It's like, the devil made me do it, right? You've got some scapegoat that you can point at. It's not my fault. I didn't fuck up the universe. Someone else did. I mean, that's honestly, like, that's as I've said many times to people, like, my biggest problem with Gnosticism is the lack of responsibility that it puts on the person. It's like, oh, well, but if I'm a Gnostic, I have to live this very specific life. Yeah, but if you're a Gnostic, you're basically saying that everything is wrong and it's not your fault. And that, like what can you do, and you can kind of throw your hands up and not have to think about it, right? No, you are responsible for your life. You are responsible for people you care about. You're the one pouring your heart into it. But that's not what people want to hear. No, they want, hey, AI, please, yes, do all of this for me. I mean, that's the thrust behind 99% of Silicon Valley is it's it's a bunch of immature boys who want mommies. They want their mommy back, right? Mommy technology, mommy GPT. Mommy, could you turn the lights on? Mommy, could you automatically have my coffee ready for me when I wake up in the morning? Mommy, can I check on? I'm scared. What's going on outside? Please turn on my Google camera. Blah, blah. Mommy. It's religious. It's a religion. So, that is a message that deserves some pushback. Look, hey, I love computers as much as the next person. Okay? Like, really. And would I enjoy some automation with some, data processes and other things that I want done, with my computer and so on? Yeah, sure. Do I want an AI to like control my calendar, tell me what to do throughout the day and so on? No. Is it nice if it can, like, I guess, track my macros or some shit? Okay, like, yes, that can be helpful. Is it nice to have it, kind of like be able to take advantage of medical knowledge, right? And give me a, readout based upon my actions or something like that? Sure. But then notice within that, I am proactively living my life. I am proactively working towards being a better, healthier person. Okay. And, basically like the quote unquote AI in the background, okay, can, collate the data around this so that it makes more sense to me in a way that our human brains weren't designed to do. That's fine. But the idea that I want it running so many more aspects of my life? No. Or civilization or society in general? No. I've always said this, and I'll say it again. Computers are to only do one thing. What we tell them to do. That's it. That's it. So I can be super positive about, latest developments in what quote unquote AI can do. Again, AI, as many researchers will tell you, that is a complete misnomer. Like, we should never use those terms. You have other developers and researchers who would tell you, yeah, we should have never called things like neural networks and all this stuff. Like, those are anthropomorphisms that just don't fit. I mean, this is such a huge problem. We're humans. We anthropomorphize fucking everything so that we can connect with it and identify it. But we don't, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we don't always remind ourselves that we're anthropomorphizing. That's the problem. And it's another case where we're anthropomorphizing, like, did we create quote unquote AI? It was AI God. Did we create God? Yes. Why? Because thou art God. You already are. So your actions are extensions within that framework. Does that mean that AI is actually God? No. No. I feel like that might have come off as somewhat confusing, but I hope you got my point. And of course, you can always email me and ask me the questions if you have them. fu@xxtech.net. Okay. You have to understand this technology. Like, it is not what people are telling you it is. It's not what Mission Impossible Final Reckoning tells you that it is. And this stuff, maybe in some form or fashion, somehow it could have happened before. I could not speak to that it didn't. But like, your ideas, like the Yahweh of the Talmud and so on, is not an AI. It's not. So, fun theory to play with, but then let's also keep that in mind that while yes, movies are magic, at the same time, sometimes a movie really is just a movie. Sometimes. And poorly put together, like Mission Impossible Final Reckoning was. That said, how about a rating quick, huh? While we're wrapping up, how about a rating? I mean, look, like Tom Cruise is phenomenal. And at 62 years old in this film, holy hell. I mean, he looked incredible. In fact, it was the first movie I can recall seeing. I'm sure there's been others, but it's the first one I can recall seeing where I saw somebody wearing Vibram 5 fingers. Fuck yes, man. That was awesome to see that, and especially in Mission Impossible. I am a gigantic fan of this franchise. Before the movies came out, folks. Like when I went to go see the first movie when I was a teenager in 96, okay, oh man, I mean, like I was all over it. Why was I all over it though? Because I was already watching the original show, because Leonard Nimoy was in it for some of the final seasons in particular, but in general, like I was already watching the show like crack anyway. I've been a fan of this shit my whole life. All right, really. So I hate it. It annoys me that this movie I don't feel it really lived up to snuff, especially for the final film. And this is another point I didn't get into, and I'll say it briefly. Like, I'm also worried, like some of these franchises, and I don't think it has to be the nature of every franchise, but maybe it is. Like, you can't go on forever with these movies over and over again, unless you do kind of like soft reboots like James Bond does, or something like that. Like, this was, in my opinion, the first time. And I mean, and really, I guess it happened with Dead Reckoning now that we didn't get the real payoff with a true part 2 to it. There's franchises where the movies just keep getting better, right? Like Mission Impossible is one of those. Fast and the Furious, shut up, yes. Fast and the Furious was one of those. Up until Fast 9. Like, Fate of the Furious was incredible. What a kick-ass fucking movie. Fucking dynamite. And talk about one that actually laid out some philosophy as well. I mean, awesome. Okay, but you got to Fast 9, it started to go downhill. Fast 10, what the fuck was that? Fast 11, I'm terrified. Stop. I mean, I can barely, other than in Fast 9, they finally went to space, which I predicted, by the way. I can barely tell you what even happened in that film. Fast 8, I could tell you everything about it. This is another case. They should have stopped with what was it, Fallout, right? Was that the sixth one? Yeah. Anyway, the one after Rogue Nation. They should have stopped right there, But Hollywood can't do that. I mean, in some ways, like Star Trek. Star Trek should have ended with Insurrection. I'm not as negative on the movie Nemesis as some, but really Insurrection should have been the end, because it got to the point. It got to Star Trek's ultimate point, which is actually apropos to what we're talking about, in that like technology isn't everything. That was very much the message of Star Trek Insurrection. Easily one of my favorite, in my top 3 of Star Trek films. There's others where like they go so long and you're like, holy shit, they just keep getting better. Like, how do you do that 8 films deep? Well, Mission Impossible wasn't able to pull that off, and that's continuing to be a theme in Hollywood as much as everything else, like making completely different movies than were intended. It's very much a theme in Hollywood lately, it seems, to just like nosedive these fucking franchises, and what a pity, because Mission Impossible was doing the impossible in that. How can a franchise be this good for over 50 years? How? Like, that's incredible, Star Wars couldn't even do that. Star Trek couldn't even do that. So, anyway, this movie, I give it, I mean, like, look, the stunts in this film are awesome. There's so much good stuff in this. It's still hard to like not give it an 8 out of 10, which is a pity, because Dead Reckoning I would give maybe a 9. I mean, it's hard because it's a setup film, so it doesn't exactly exist on its own. But like every previous Mission Impossible film, they're all 10 out of 10s. Every single one of them, even Mission Impossible 2. Ghost Protocol, fucking 10 out of 10. I mean, they're all incredible, you know, and it's such a shame to have to downrank these. But again, like that supercut, I'm waiting for that edit, that fan edit where we're going to put these two movies together. And I think then we'll actually have a very impressive film, going forward. And really, I hope they just stop the franchise now. Like you pushed it to the limit, man. And good on Tom Cruise for doing so. But stop, please. And also everybody, you know, like freaking out about AI, also, please stop. It's not what you think it is. It doesn't mean that it couldn't potentially be dangerous. It could, but it's not Skynet. It's not for the reasons that you think. Okay? Because it doesn't think. And Apple proved that reason, or did a good job. Well, it's going to get better in the future. Oh, maybe. But that's evidence we don't have. In fact, again, it seems quite the opposite. That we end up with diminishing returns even on more advanced models. So, you know, and maybe that's, who knows, maybe that is proof of its intelligence, right? Because that seems to be how humans went. It's like, yeah, you hit this high of how intelligent you are, and then everything just nosedives, right? And we end up with orange people in the White House. However the hell that happens. Though, boy, did Virtuosity predict that one. Oh, what am I talking about? Oh, you're going to have to wait. I'm going to get into that in another episode. Whew. All right, that's it for this Real-Time Sovryn. I will see all of you on the other side.